It's 3 p.m., so I'm going to just start with some housekeeping and an introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here this afternoon with us. Um, this event is supported by the Friends of the Santa Fe Public Library, so many thanks to them for sponsoring. The structure of this event is first going to be an introduction, then a presentation and activity with Melanie Gilman, and lastly, we'll have time to take questions and comments. If you have any technical difficulties, feel free to write it in the chat box there, and I'll address you that there with you. And to ask a question or make a comment, feel free to raise your hand to be unmuted, or type it in the chat box or Q&A box. Oh, the meetings don't have Q&A, so just the chat box. Melanie Gilman is a cartoonist who specializes in LGBTQ books for kids and teens. They are the creator of the webcomic and graphic novel As the Crow Flies, published in 2017 by Iron Circus Comics, and winner of the 2018 Stonewall Honor Award. Their newest book, Stage Dreams, was published by Lerner Graphic Universe in 2019. They are also a senior lecturer in the Comics MFA Program at the California College of the Arts. Gilman was co-editor with and a contributor to The Other Side, an anthology of 19 queer paranormal romance comics published in 2016. In 2016, they began writing an ongoing Steven Universe comic series for Boom Studios. Please welcome Melanie Gilman.
Hello, thank you all for being here. I'm glad to have some folks here ready to talk about comics and also try drawing some comics today. So how this is going to work is this is going to move very quickly because I have a lot of stuff that I'm hoping that we can cover today. So bear with me as I'm like racing through things. I'm going to start off with a very short presentation where I'm going to talk a little bit about specifically like what makes comics important and specifically what makes comics important for folks in the LGBTQ community and other marginalized communities. Why is this an important medium for folks like us? And then after that, we are going to transition into a very short and very simple comics drawing exercise. So yes, you are going to be doing some hands-on drawing today. I'm going to be walking you through the process of making your very own short comic. So while I'm talking at the beginning of this, if you haven't already, it would be a good time for you to see what drawing supplies you can scrounge up around the room here. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. If you have a sheet of blank paper and a pencil or a pen, you are golden. You do not need anything fancier than that. If you have markers lying around, crayons, colored pencils, whatever you feel up to using, you can go ahead and grab those. Also, if you're a person who likes to do some drawing on things like a tablet or an iPad. That's also totally legitimate and awesome here. Just really whatever you have lying around, but don't worry about that just yet. I'm gonna go ahead and screen share for a bit. Let's see if we can make Zoom do this for us. All right, you should be seeing my screen here. So I'm gonna go through a very, very short slideshow here to talk a little bit about some comics, and then we will transition over into our hands-on exercise. To introduce myself again, hi, I'm Melanie Gilman. I'm a non-binary person. They, them are my pronouns, and I am a graphic novelist. And the things that we're going to be going over today is, first off, this presentation where I'm going to be talking at you for a little bit. Then we're going to go into our comics drawing workshop. And then after that, I am going to hopefully have a couple minutes at the very end for folks who may want to share their comics. I'm not going to force anyone to share the work that they're drawing today, but I'm going to strongly encourage you to do so, just because that can be a really fun and delightful part of workshops like this, if we get to look at each other's work and see what other folks in the room have made during our time together. All right, and what I do specifically is I am a graphic novelist. I am both a writer and an illustrator of comics, and I work primarily in LGBTQ comics for kids and teens in all sorts of different genres. I've done, modern day realistic stories. I've done Western romances. I've written for TV properties like Steven Universe, also for Care Bears. Done a bunch of stuff all over the map here, but always with a focus on LGBTQ stories for LGBTQ youth. I'm also a teacher by trade and teach at a bunch of different schools, including California College of the Arts and also the Center for Cartoon Studies, and most recently the Columbus College of Art and Design in the comics programs at all of those places. All right, so here's what I really want to talk about today. What's so great about comics? Like, why should we care about this? What makes this a important medium, and what makes it important in particular when we're talking about LGBTQ folks or other marginalized communities? What makes this an important medium for those folks? So one thing, when we're talking about comics, what I'm really talking about here is it's not just words and pictures that have been kind of smushed together. I tend to think of comics as being more like a Lego set. What we're doing is we're drawing individual little drawings, but then we're kind of piecing them together sort of like Legos and building narratives out of them. We're building stories, and the construction material that we're using is drawings. And there's a ton of possibilities that are inherent when you are using drawings as a narrative construction device, basically, as the Lego blocks of building a story. One really beautiful and interesting thing about comics is that every single comic that exists out there is something which could not be perfectly replicated by any other human being on the planet. That is something that I firmly believe. Every comic is very, very specific to a specific person's hand. It's kind of like handwriting. The way that lines are going to come out of your hand for drawing is very similar to what we understand about handwriting, in the way that every human being has at least a little bit of uniqueness to their own handwriting. What we're seeing are these very personal and very specific, unique marks on a page, and every comic is something which is essentially irreplaceable. This could not be made perfectly and perfectly replicated by another human being on the planet, because every person is bringing a little bit of their own selves to this. We're seeing this stylistic map of an individual person's hand as they're moving across the page. And that's something really magical and wonderful about comics. Comics, for that reason, I tend to firmly believe is kind of one of the closest ways that we can come to seeing directly through another human being's eyes, because we're seeing a visual depiction of how that person perceives the world, what they are seeing when they are moved through their lives, interact with other people, things like that. It's very personal and very unique and very specific to that creator. And this is one of those things which, is wonderful about comics and makes it kind of unique in the realm of visual media in general. We're seeing such a specific glimpse of the world through an individual's eyes, and it can be so specific from person to person. Also, when we're talking about marginalized folks in general, and also, more specific to the topic of this talk, LGBTQ people, self-depiction makes comics a really powerful tool for marginalized storytellers. Because for instance, for people in the LGBTQ community, oftentimes our own depictions of ourselves, of people like us, our communities, are being kind of controlled by people who are outside our communities. But with comics, you have complete control over your own self-depiction. You are the person who is laying down those lines and choosing what you want to showcase and what you want to leave out, and the specific way that you want to present yourselves. And this is a really powerful tool for people who are oftentimes kind of gate-kept out of traditional media, traditional publishing, or just, haven't had a ton of mainstream recognition in general. The way that we are depicting ourselves in our own stories is very direct and very personal and unique and accurate to our own lives, because we have a lot of control over those self-depictions. Similarly, comics, by extension, also allows us a way to depict our own communities in a very personal way. When you're reading a comic, you're not just reading an invented story by another person. What you're looking at is basically a visual depiction of that person's own community, of the people around them, the people they love, the people they care about, the people that they've met over the course of their lives. And they're putting that down on paper in a way that you are able to directly access. And again, this is something which is really hard to replicate in a lot of other mediums, and it's something that comics, we kind of don't sing the praises of this enough. This is such an interesting aspect of this medium, and such a, one of the reasons why it can be so important and so vibrant as an art form. Also, on top of all this, another great thing about comics is that the comics drawing tools can be incredibly simple. If you have random pens that you found on the ground and like a notebook or a few pieces of paper, you're off to a start right there. You don't necessarily need fancy tools or fancy art supplies or, fancy drawing education to be able to draw a comic. This is one of the beautiful things about comics too, is that, because every individual creator has such an individual style to them. The diversity and range of styles and drawing types across the board is incredibly diverse. There are professional cartoonists out there who are only drawing things in stick figures, and like their books sell great. Everyone loves them. There are also people who are doing, beautiful, fully fleshed out like oil paintings in their comics, and that's amazing too. But this is a medium that can encompass both of those very easily. And this is not a medium where there's like an economic bar that you have to hop in order to participate in. You don't have to be going out and buying the fancy art supplies in order to do this. This is something that people can do on just like regular pens, regular paper, whatever you have lying around. Also, comics are incredibly easy to publish, in particular online. One of the kind of exciting and amazing things that's been happening in the past decade or so is that we have access to so many more tools when it comes to self-publishing. And this is in particular very important for marginalized folks of all sorts, but cartoonists in particular, because this is giving us access to tools which allow us to directly find our own readership and create things and put them out in a place where the public can access them without having to go through any gatekeepers. And this can be as simple as, I know people who will draw a comic on a piece of paper, grab their phone, take a picture of it, and then upload it to, Instagram or Twitter or whatever you have. And congratulations, you just published yourself if you did that. The bar is incredibly low, incredibly easy to hop. And this is one of the reasons why the field is expanding so much right now, because it's very easy for people to enter into it. It's harder and harder to gatekeep the kinds of people who oftentimes have had a difficult time getting a foothold in traditional publishing out of something like comics, and especially online comics or social media, things like this. Self-publishing in particular is really important, I think, for marginalized creators, and also even more specifically for folks in the LGBTQ community, because if you're the type of person who wants to tell stories that oftentimes are more difficult to find ground in mainstream traditional publishing, choosing a self-publishing path is a way for you to kind of circumvent those gatekeepers in traditional publishing. You don't have to wait for anyone else's permission to publish a comic if you're just putting it up online or making your own zines or, running a Kickstarter or self-publishing a graphic novel, all of these things. You don't need anyone's permission to do that because you can do it all on your own from your own home, oftentimes with tools that you already have lying around in the house. And there are a lot of people who are going this route right now because the tools are pretty darn accessible as far as artistic creations go, and publishing is a thing which most people can do with the tools that they already have on their hands. So this is opening up a lot of doors, in particular for folks in the LGBTQ community. And this is one of the reasons why we're seeing such a growth in terms of diversity in the comics field specifically in the past few years. So again, if you want to do this, I really do want to, encourage you to think of this as being something which is not scary and not all that difficult to do. There are ways that you can draw comics that are just stick figures. There are ways that you can think about comics as being an incredibly simple medium. And if you're putting things up online or just sharing them with friends, it's incredibly easy to do so. There's a lot of tools that are available to us that have not been available to previous generations of artists who came before us. And there's more hungry audiences out there who love the personal nature of comics. We love that this is something which is so specific to a specific creator's hand. It couldn't be replicated by anything else. We're seeing something so personal and so unique from the creators who are making these works, and that's one of the things that makes this beautiful. So, all that said, what this really boils down to is that everyone in this room could make a comic right now. Comics is something which doesn't have to be intimidating. It doesn't have to be scary. You don't need fancy tools or an art school background or anything to make a comic. And this is something that we're going to explore in this class today. So, I said earlier that we're going to be doing a comics drawing exercise together, and that is the thing that I'm going to transition us into. So again, grab whatever tools you have lying around. These do not have to be fancy. If you've got computer paper, if you've got scratch paper, if you've got some random pencils or random pens or markers, whatever you have lying around, this is totally going to work for us. Let me close out of this screen share real quick so I can talk you through this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk us through step by step the process of drawing a very, very, very short, very, very simple comic together. And this is going to go fast because, we only have an hour and I already talked for like 15 minutes here. So be prepared for this to move fast. For folks in the room who have never drawn a comic before, the thing that I want to emphasize to you is that first off, whatever skills you are walking into this class with are totally fine. If you don't feel comfortable drawing anything other than stick figures, that's completely fine. There are professional cartoonists who only draw things in stick figures. Like, stick with what you feel comfortable with and it's going to be completely fine. Also, because this is so short, please, give yourself some credit that I'm not asking you to draw a masterpiece here. No one's going to draw a masterpiece in like 45 minutes here. We're going to draw a comic together, but we don't need to draw a amazing comic together is basically what I'm trying to say here. So that said, here is the very first thing that I would like us to do. So comics, as we've mentioned before, are going to be, stories that are built out of pictures. And generally with comics, we tend to start with the writing side of things, and then after that move into the drawing side of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give us a prompt, and then I'm going to walk us through the process of writing this out as if we were writing a real comic script together. So let me give us our prompt first. This is the thing that I want us to be writing about today. We are going to be talking about joy and affirmation. And this is, this sounds like vague and silly, but here's the thing. If we're talking about LGBTQ folks, if we're talking about marginalized folks of any sort, claiming our own joy, claiming our own experiences of affirmation that have happened to us over the course of our lives, this is something incredibly powerful because mainstream media is oftentimes not depicting our joy, not depicting the times that we have felt empowered, felt loved, things like that. They're oftentimes only depicting the, the suffering that we have experienced. And so there's something really powerful in owning our own moments of joy. So here's what I want us to do for the very first section of this. We're going to start with a brainstorming exercise. What I would like you to do is grab a blank piece of paper, any old blank piece of paper that you have lying around, and a pen. And I'm going to give us a minute or so. I am going to have a timer running for this so we stay on track here. And what I would like you to do is just brainstorm a list of things that you could possibly draw a comic about, which are related to this topic of personal joy and personal affirmation. I want you to think about times in your life where you have felt affirmation about some aspect of your identity. If you're an LGBTQ person, it could be related to gender, it could be related to sexuality. If you're not, it could just be related to other things which are a component of what makes you the specific, unique person that you are. Think about moments of affirmation in your own identity that you have experienced over the course of your life, and then just make a list and just try to keep your pen moving as much as possible. Some of these ideas are going to be good, some of them are going to be bad. That is the nature of brainstorming. Don't worry, not all of these have to be, knocking it out of the park. Also, if you feel stuck on this, instead of stressing out and trying to figure out, oh no, what are good ideas? Think about what are the worst ideas you could come up with instead. What are actively terrible ideas? And write some of those down instead, because that's the kind of thing that oftentimes tends to break through the log jam in your brain when you're trying to do brainstorming. All right, so I'm going to put a minute on the clock and I'm going to let us all do that brainstorming exercises. I will see you back here in 60 seconds. Go ahead and brainstorm. All right, wherever you're at, go ahead and put your pens down for a second here. It's okay if you only have a short list. This is a short exercise here, but hopefully you've got a couple things that you could potentially work with here. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna pick one of those items from the list. And again, don't put too much pressure on yourself here. Just go with whatever one feels like, the thing that you're most interested in drawing out today. Doesn't have to be an amazing, astonishing, world-changing idea. Something small and personal is completely fine here. But you're going to take that one idea, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start the process of writing this out as if we were writing a comic script. And here is the super secret, high-tech, I'm swearing you to secrecy. You can't give away all our cartoonist secrets. This is the super secret comics scripting technique from me, a professional cartoonist, that I'm about to share with you. And it is making a list. Believe it or not, this is a legitimate way that a lot of cartoonists make our scripts. This is a way to get started thinking about what your story is going to look like. You're going to break it down into moment by moment by moment steps. If you want, you can write this out as like first, next, last, or you can just have a numbered list like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many numbers you need in order to write this story out. This is what I would like you to do for that idea that you generated. If you were to tell me this story as if it were a bulleted list of events, what would it look like? First, you went to your mom's house. Second, you ate dinner with your mom. Third, you ate dessert with your mom. Fourth, etc., etc. Whatever the events in that story are, just write them out in a list. And don't worry about editing yourself at this point. Go ahead and make this long form as much as you need to. And again, don't worry about this being fancy or well written, anything like that. That is not the important part of this process here. We are just writing a list of events as they happened related to the specific topic that you chose. So once again, I'll give you 2 minutes for this one because there's a little bit more writing involved here. And then I will check back in and we will move on to our next step here. So go ahead and start working on your list. All right, wherever you're at, go ahead and put your pens down again. Okay, so we're now at a stage where we've got the start of a comic script here. What we've got is kind of a long form list of events in our narrative. You know, first this happened, next this happened, next this happened, next this happened, and then hopefully, finally, this happened. And that's the end of our short story here. Probably everyone has a different number of items on their list. But what we're going to do from here is we're going to move into an editing stage. And editing is an important part of writing a comic script. You know, usually for cartoonists, the thing that we often do is we often kind of overwrite on the first draft where, you know, we've got all these ideas and all these words and we've got, you know, we're listing everything out in great detail. But then you kind of got to go back and be like, some of these gotta go because comics and drawing takes a really long time and I don't want my hand to fall off. So we're gonna try to cut some of this out or condense it down a little bit in order to save our wrists, save us some time, and hopefully have a, you know, more beautiful and streamlined final narrative that we're telling over the course of this story. So what I like to do for these, we're gonna go back to our lists, but we're gonna go through an editing stage here. And this is oftentimes what I will end up doing at this stage. Do things like, you know, look at your list and say, Could some of these go? Do you need all of these moments in this story? Are there things that you could get rid of entirely and the narrative would still work? If you want a hint, by the way, oftentimes, sometimes these come at the very beginning. Sometimes your story could start a little later than you originally thought it needed to. Also, sometimes it can end a little bit earlier than what you originally thought it may have needed to end on. Could it end in an earlier moment? Could you leave something off? Or are there parts of the middle that are, kind of unnecessary and you could get rid of? Also, you could think about combining things. Are there moments in this story where you could take two ideas or two moments and kind of smush them together into one single drawing and therefore save yourself a little bit of time, save yourself a little bit of energy? So that's what I want you to do here. I want you to go back into your list, and the target number that I'm going to encourage you to aim for is 4 final bullet points. I want to see if you can take your lists and then boil them down to 4 moments only. Boil this entire story down to just 4 bullet points. And that might mean erasing some of them. It might mean combining some of them into one moment. But think about different ways that you can condense this into just 4 moments here. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes again for this, and I will see you back in 2 minutes. All right, go ahead and put your pens down for a second, wherever you're at. Hopefully everyone was able to take their starter scripts here and boil them down to just 4 little bullet points, 4 little moments. And what we're going to do from here is we are going to take each of those 4 moments and turn them into a comic book panel. So what I would encourage us to do is we're going to turn these into little 4-panel comic strips. If you're a person who's ever, if you remember back in the days when newspaper strips were a thing, you're probably already kind of familiar with that form. Oftentimes 4 panels is like a really good solid number for telling a very short and self-contained story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and doesn't need a whole lot of other bells and whistles on top of that. That's what we're going to be aiming for today. Also, if you're a person who enjoys web comics, you're probably also pretty familiar with this concept of, paring things down to just a very short format. I'm not going to demand that you format your comics this way. Obviously, comics is one of these mediums where, like, really there aren't any rules. All the rules that I'm telling you are things that I'm just kind of making up arbitrarily in order to make this exercise easier for you. But if you're a person who has never really drawn a comic before and you're feeling a little bit out of your depth here is what I would like you to start with. I would like you to take the piece of paper that you are going to be drawing on, and I would like you to draw 4 little boxes on it like this. Think of this as being a window pane. And again, comics, like I've been talking about, are kind of this window into another person's life in a very personal way. And that's kind of what we're embodying with this exercise here. This is you giving other folks a little window into some aspect of your life, some aspect of your experience. And again, if you want to structure your 4 panels in some other way, I'm not, no one's going to call the comics cops on you. You can do what you want here. But if you're feeling, like you would like more structure and more guidance, this is what I would start with. Draw 4 little boxes on your piece of paper as if you were drawing a window. And then from there, what you're going to do is you're going to take that condensed, edited down script that we already walked through, and you're going to take each one of those 4 bullet points and make them into one of these drawings. And this is where the final product is going to be completely up to you. We are going to be drawing these quickly because our time together is short. So again, don't be afraid to just do stick figures. If stick figures is what you feel comfortable with, that is completely and totally okay here. We are very pro stick figures in this room. You can add text as much or as little as you need to. You can fill these with drawings, use whatever tools you have available to you. Pencils are fine, pens are fine, markers are fine, whatever you have lying around is totally fine. But take those 4 bullet points and see if you can turn them into a little 4-panel comic all of your own. So this is going to be the part of the exercise where I'm going to give you the most time, because obviously drawing takes a much longer time than writing does. It is 3:36 right now in Santa Fe time, and we have until 4 p.m. So I'm going to give us a little less than let's try for 15 minutes here. I know that's going to be short, but I do want to leave some time at the end that we could share these comics with each other on a volunteer basis. I won't force anyone to show their comics off, but I would love to see what you made. So again, I'm going to put 15 minutes on the clock. We're going to get through as much of these comics as possible. Don't worry about them being masterpieces, because like drawing comics is hard already, and now I'm making you do it in 15 minutes. Stick figures are fine. Whatever you feel comfortable doing is going to be totally fine here. And then we will have a little time at the end that we can share these, we can talk about them, and also we can go into a Q&A too, where if you have questions that you want to ask me about comics or my work or anything else, I am totally happy to answer those. All right, so I'm going to put 15 minutes on the clock, and I look forward to seeing your comics in a very short while. See you in a bit. All right, that is 15 minutes. So wherever you're at, go ahead and put your pens down for just a second here. We've got just a few minutes left before our hour is up here. I hope this was at least a experience for folks, even if this was a somewhat harried drawing experience. The good news is if you try to draw comics outside of this class, no one is going to make you do it in 15 minutes. You can take as much time as you need to. So I do want to see if folks would like to share the comics that they drew here today. I know that it can be intimidating being the very first person to go. So I am going to make myself be the very first person to go. I never make folks in classes do exercises that I am not also ready and willing to put myself through. So I did actually draw a comic in 15 minutes here with the same exercise. So I will put myself in the position of being the first person who has to share theirs with the class here. But then I'll open it up and see if other folks want to show theirs off too. So here is what I ended up drawing for this class. I'll see if I can get it on the screen here. I was thinking a lot about kayaking as a form of gender expression, and non-binary people, we have weird experiences of gender euphoria in general. So this is not a normal trans person experience, but hey, it's something that's been on my mind lately. So a comic I drew in 15 minutes here. I'll read it aloud to you. Let's see. So kayaking feels gender affirming in ways that are hard to describe. Feeling my arm's strength while paddling. Complete freedom to move where I want. And an expanded perspective of worlds we don't often see. All right, now that I've put myself out there, are there other folks in the room who would want to show off the comic that they drew just now? Yeah, go for it. Maddie.
Hello, I am also a they, them person and also trans, and I wrote or did a comic about something that's kind of more, I think, expected in the trans experience. The last panel, I kind of wrote too many words in it, so I'm going to use a reference, which was my reference image, and it's related to the comic anyway. So basically, these are the first three panels. So I started HRT in April, and one evening was kind of feeling not great. And so I was like, I'm going to affirm myself by drawing my ideal future form. And I was trying to do that, but nothing really felt right. Oh, so that's the second panel. Third panel, nothing really felt right, but it was also 3 a.m. So I was like, that's okay. And then the other day I was looking through my notebook and found out that I had actually already drawn my ideal future form to some extent when I drew a character for an RPG. And so this is the character sheet of the person who I just basically had to redraw in the comic. Yeah, so that's my little comic.
Oh my God, thank you. I love that. Also, you got a lot done in 15 minutes there. So kudos to you for that. That is always one of the challenges of this exercise. But I love that. I love the character that you designed. That is great. They are wonderful. And I hope that your RPG adventures are a success. Living beefcake cowboy dreams there. Cool. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Are there other people who would want to show theirs off? Lori, go for it.
Thanks so much. Can I ask what RPG means first?
Role-play games.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. So I've got a
Lori, if you can hear us, your screen's frozen. Not sure how to fix this. Sorry.
Zoom is always a little bit of an adventure with these things.
Well, hopefully we get Lori back with her connection, and so she can share.
Yeah. If in the meanwhile there was another person who wanted to go, I'd be happy to open up the floor to you. Oh, wait, Lori might be back. Hi, Lori. Oh, I think,
I am so sorry about that. Do you want me to continue or you want me to
yes,
stop?
go right ahead.
Let's go. Okay, so I've got a 4-panel and it's about getting married to my wife in 2008. And so the first panel is sort of a big map of the US, and it says in search of a marriage, because we got together in 95 and it wasn't legal. It was only legal for a brief shining moment in California in 2008. So the map is sort of like a timeline too, like when we got together, and then we went to Vermont. So it's sort of like, oh my God, we had to go all the way across country to Vermont to have a civil union. And then finally 2008 in San Francisco. And it's just a little graphic of filling out the online application for the city of San Francisco. And then we had the ceremony, it was just us in front of this Harvey Milk statue. And then the final one is just us. And I tend to think in terms of photographs. So we've got a photograph of the two of us with our hands in each other's back pockets of our Levi's, just walking down Castro Street. So that's it.
Oh my gosh, that is wonderful. Also, I've been missing San Francisco a lot right now. I usually go out there every summer to teach. And you really captured the like San Francisco streets that are all tilted at like a 45-degree angle. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That is a wonderful story. And also I love that you start with like the establishing shot of like the whole US, getting to see like, here's the whole map to emphasize like, here's the distance that you have to travel to, you know, get in on this brief window of like legalized marriage in San Francisco while you can. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. We are getting close to the end of our hour here, so I do probably have to close things down here. But thank you so much, everyone who participated in this, especially folks in the room who have never drawn a comic before. I know I was asking you to probably put yourself a little bit outside of your comfort zone, and I'm so glad that folks did actually draw along with us. I love the comics that I got to see from you all. If there's anyone who didn't get a chance to share their comics but would love to show me them, I am going to throw my email into the chat. And yes, you can absolutely send me questions, send me pictures of your comics if you want me to see them. And other than that, thank you so much for spending this hour with me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Melanie. It was a lot of fun. I hope to have you back again, maybe even in person. But a million times thank you. This was an awesome workshop and a really awesome, interesting presentation. And I look forward to trying my hand more at this. I think I got a lot out of it. I hope everyone else did too. So everyone have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, Melanie. This is great.
Thank you so much.